Hello. Hi. So this is class number 2, right? For CA Foundation Economics. I'm so happy and glad to meet you in my second class. So basically, today we are going to continue where we left off. Okay, in the last class, we've studied about IKEA, how IKEA changed its DNA for India. And we've talked about Arun Ice Creams and how the ice cream owner has completely shifted his focus from being an ice cream entrepreneur towards the milk production, towards the milk milk industry. So the dairy industry is very how do you call, it's very lively, it's active 365 days a year. So he chose ice creams first, and then he moved on to dairy products, and then the Hudson curd and all that, and Ibaco. There are a variety and range of products that this company has introduced. And I have told you about Ola and Uber, right? The Ola and Uber, they are competitors, of course, but when you compare how how a venture capitalist or how an investor invest in the ride hailing apps, they will invest in both the companies, meaning thereby when there is an outcome of Ola winning the race or Uber winning the race, either way the investor is going to earn money. So that's how the business investment strategy of the investor has gone. I've told you, this example was in New Zealand. Okay, in New Zealand, Ola and Uber wanted to start the operations, and when they went and approached the investor, Ola went and approached the invested in Ola, but simultaneously they also invested in Uber, meaning thereby they wanted to leverage the risk. Okay, and then I've told you about TVs and air conditioners in India, and Blinkit, the way quick commerce is going to work in India. What is quick commerce? Quick commerce is, see, in commerce we know we trade. Okay, when it comes to normal e-commerce or internet related commerce, it says that you can buy and sell through internet as a platform. Now you're calling e-commerce, meaning thereby e-commerce is nothing but electronic commerce. I'm sorry, I have some nose issues. So when we're calling about quick commerce, what do you mean by quick commerce? Of course, this quick commerce happens on e-commerce. It is a sub part of e-commerce. But quick commerce is like you order a product and within 10 minutes or within 8 minutes, under 10 minutes to 8 minutes to 10 minutes, the product is delivered to you. This kind of quick delivery of goods that you order is called as quick commerce. Now, there are many people in the sense, there are many companies who is operating in this area, in this segment. Example, Swiggy's Instamart, okay, and then you have this Blinkit, Zepto, okay, Big Basket. Everybody is supplying you the goods and services under 10 minutes or under 8 minutes. So this kind of quick commerce is a great revolutionary concept in terms of business, because in Amazon or in Meesho or in any other e-commerce platform like Myntra, once you order a product, okay, in Amazon, it will take at least 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. Okay, so generally the ordering of these products through e-commerce will make us wait for at least 24 to 48 hours. But here, under quick commerce, you're getting the same product under 10 minutes. So initially when they tried to launch this concept of delivering it under 8 to 10 minutes, there was a huge doubt whether this kind of supply of products under 10 minutes, whether it can catch a lot of demand, whether there is a lot of demand for this kind of supply, this kind of business as a product, can it be viable? There were a lot of questions. But okay, but Zomato's Blinkit, they knew that the demand for the products which can be delivered under 10 minutes is going to be huge, and they started it. When Blinkit was introduced, okay, there was only one concern for them. For example, every month if you're ordering like 4 to 5 times from Zomato, if a consumer is ordering 10 to 20 times in Blinkit, that's all, you can reach that kind of profit. So this was in the minds of entrepreneur, this was in the minds of the investors of, like, Zomato is a parent company and it has invested in Blinkit. So Blinkit has to make profits, it has to make more revenue, it has to become a viable company for Zomato to keep on continuing the process. So Blinkit or quick commerce is what we today known as delivery under 10 minutes. Do we have any debate on whether 10-minute delivery is needed or not? Of course, there is a debate across India. In Tamil Nadu, major ethical orators, they have raised their voice against this 10-minute delivery, saying that we are playing with the life of the delivery boys, saying that under 8 minutes, under 10 minutes, delivery would mean the delivery boys are put under pressure to be as efficient as possible or more efficient than necessary. At this point in time, what will happen to the delivery boys? They might not, they might not look at the signals, or they might look at the short routes. This might happen, and putting so much of pressure in terms of time will only make things tougher for the people who are involved in the making of this business. It's not the entrepreneurs, it's not the consumers who is benefiting the 10-minute delivery. It is a working class who are going to get stuffed, who are going to get pressurized, or it is going to be regressive for the working class. So these kind of debates happen then and there. These kind of debates, whether a particular business policy enacted by Reliance or enacted by Blinkit or enacted by Zomato, Swiggy, anybody, it will come under the scanner in front of public eyes. The public will view the business policies, and if there is something wrong, if you're putting a repressive pressure, if you're making the business back, if you're making the working class people work more and more, and if you're sucking the energy out of them for unreasonably understated wages, then people are definitely going to raise their voices. So economics is not just about doing business in terms of money, making profit, just going away. No, it's not like that. So everything comes under the umbrella of economics. So you now know what is quick commerce, right? And then we're talking about two facilities that we have here. One is bazaar and the other one is mall. What is this bazaar and what is this mall? I'll tell you. When we take Amazon as an example for e-commerce, Amazon basically is a company which sells products, goods, okay, for a very reasonable standard price. For example, it's not that cheap for you to buy in Amazon.in. It is somewhat standardized prices. You don't find cheap and best products. That kind of connotation will not work in Amazon. So in Amazon, you will definitely have to buy things for a standardized prices. So now, when Amazon was introduced, Meesho was not there. When Amazon was introduced, not the other Myntra apps, okay, these apps were not there. But today you have a heavy competition, and that too with apps like Meesho. Meesho is offering what Amazon is offering at half its price. So people are moving towards Meesho. Meesho, one of the flagship things about Meesho is that majority of its transactions, majority of its goods, or majority of the sales that happens in Meesho is only non-branded items, straight from the manufacturing sector, straight from the manufacturing place, where it has not established a big a tag of big, how do you call that, brand has not been established, but the products are good. So if you want to buy these kind of products, you can go to Meesho. So the product starts from 100, 150, 99 rupees. So this is the attractive feature of Meesho. But you have to be very careful when you analyze Amazon versus Meesho, or Amazon versus Myntra, or versus Meesho, or any other online store. So when it comes to Amazon, it has a standardized setup, okay, where they sell only branded goods. Branded goods in the sense, more of branded goods are available only in Amazon and not in Meesho. You cannot find a Lavi bag under Meesho. You cannot find the branded, for example, Baggett bags or any other bags for that matter, which has a brand value in Meesho, because Meesho is a place of trade for people, for consumers who look out, okay, who is on a lookout for goods which are cheaper, has a very affordable quality. That is enough. They don't want a branded as such. So now when we talk about Amazon versus Meesho, Meesho concentrates on a massification. It's not a premiumization. But when you come to Amazon, it is premiumization, just how the Zudio and West Side works. Zudio and the West Side, both the companies, both the brands are maintained by the same entrepreneurial group, same group. But when it comes to Zudio, there they concentrate only for massification. All products under 999 or 699, 799, 1,299. It is Zudio. When you go to West Side, one shirt would cost around 4,000, 5,000. So the same distinction is going to happen in Amazon versus Meesho also. In Meesho, you'll have goods for 100, 99, 199, 299, 399. Whereas in Amazon, you will find only goods on a standardized basis for 699, 1,000 or 3,000, 4,000. So branded items are found in Amazon, and non-branded, cheap but in an affordable quality is being found in Meesho. Now, what is the problem here? The problem is Meesho is giving you cheap and best products. But I, as a consumer, when I go to Meesho, what happens? Today I wore this shirt because it is bought from Meesho. So I bought this shirt for 200, okay, 200 rupees. So the same shirt, okay, the same shirt is available in Amazon also, okay, plus or minus few bucks, that's all. But what is to be understood here? When you buy something in Meesho, you become a regular customer of Meesho, and you're also a user of Amazon. You buy, see, for example, I buy half the items from Amazon and half the items from Meesho. So when I go into Meesho and I find like 199, 299, 399 kind of goods, I also go and look for better quality products at 999 or 1,500 or 2,000. So for customers like me who are so accustomed with Meesho, but still they want, you know, better quality, better affordability, better goods. Okay, for example, if I pay 2,000 rupees in Amazon, I'll get a nice product. But if the same 2,000 is spent on Meesho, my expectations are high, because for 199 they're delivering a good product. For 1,999 they should give me better product. So I, as a consumer, will look up to Meesho for products worth 1,999, and my expectations are too high. If the same 1,999 is being paid to Amazon, my expectations are a bit low, because I know the kind of standard that they are giving me. So now listen to me. Now Meesho has stepped up its game and introduced something called as mall. So there is a store, there is a subheading called as mall inside Meesho. So what happens here? When I go into Meesho looking for like 199, 299, it is normally available. When I go into that mall, they say this is Meesho trusted, or they give a tag saying that this is really going to give you quality. This is not some substandard product. This is going to really give you the good quality. You can spend here. I guarantee, I give you the trust, something like that. So Meesho gives us this. And in the same way, when I go to Amazon, all the products there are very lavish, standardized. There is no substandard products. They are thriving through the premiumization. Everything is there for premium products only. When I go into Amazon, Amazon is like, okay, now our consumers are moving towards Meesho, and Meesho is growing 30% every year. And Amazon is growing only by 12% or 9% every year. So around 10% every year. So what is the problem? Because people are moving away from Amazon to Meesho in search of that cheap and best product. So Amazon wants to now introduce a column where they are also trying to sell non-branded goods for cheap rate. Okay, cheap rate in the sense small, comparatively, relatively lesser rate. So now Amazon wants to start a small subheading called as what? This one, Bazaar. So for Amazon, which is a premiumization kind of, that's a brand strategy. They want everything to be premiumized. So they start something called as Bazaar, where substandard products are being sold. And when it comes to Meesho, their brand strategy is what? Massification. So 199, 999, I mean, sorry, 99, 199, 299, 399. For them, the premiumization comes at mall. Here, the massification comes in the name of Bazaar. So here we have seen two e-commerce platforms. Okay, one is Amazon, the other one is Meesho. In our example, you can take any e-commerce platforms for this comparison. Okay, so Amazon is a premiumization brand or a standardized e-commerce platform, whereas Meesho is what? What is Meesho? Meesho is a massification type of thing where everything is available under 99 store, under 199 store, everything is available non-branded. Okay, this you have understood. So Amazon versus Meesho, Amazon gone into Bazaar mode and Meesho gone into mall mode. So this is like, first you start a big company with lots and lots of non-branded goods, and when people come and buy lots of non-branded goods from you and they become so loyal to you, they are also expecting branded goods from you, then go to mall, Meesho plus mall. And when people are really accustomed to Amazon because they want to buy standardized products, good quality, because prices are higher, quality is high, that kind of a connotation, and they come to Amazon, and then they feel, okay, Meesho is offering so much, no, I'm being loyal to you for a very long time. Why don't you provide me some cheaper goods, that are non-branded goods with a affordable quality? Then Amazon comes up with Bazaar idea. So everybody is fighting for your pocket money. Everybody is fighting for your salary. Every company is fighting for your discretionary income. That's all. The way in which you are going to spend, the way in which a consumer is going to spend his pocket money or his salary or the money that he has discretionarily taken and kept for spending, for that only the entire competition is being held in the market. Okay, so this is how you have to learn economics. For example, see, economics is all about how the markets are thriving. People say whether there is demand or not. Yeah, when it comes to quick commerce, nobody knew what is the demand. People had to take some faith, like what, blindfolded, when they wanted to take some risk. Okay, let me introduce this Blinkit. Let me say people can buy things within 10 minutes. Let me see whether people are buying or not. This kind of blindfolded faith. Okay, the entrepreneurs kept on the consumer spending, and it worked. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. It all depends upon the pulse of the consumers. They are very, 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 very active. They're very dynamic. They are very sensible. It's not about sensitivity. They are sensible. They know for which products they should spend 7,000, for which products they should spend only 999. They know the bifurcation. For example, Adidas, when they came to India, okay, recently, when they signed up the deals with IPL and all that, for practice matches and for the travel kits for all the men, women and under 19 teams of Indian cricketers, okay, they came up with a strategy. What is the strategy? They wanted to reach nook and corner of India. Can you imagine Adidas reaching nook and corner of India? I don't think so. Because as a company, Adidas is, I've told you, like how Amazon, Adidas is a company which thrives on premiumization. How can a company which thrives on premiumization can reach nook and corners of India? It's next to impossible, right? But Adidas wanted to change that, because Adidas in Europe, I've told you, IKEA in Europe, Adidas in Germany, or Adidas in United States, UK, Australia, New Zealand, this game is different. But when Adidas comes to India, the game has to be different, because here 1 crore is available, but it is not available, but you cannot collect that 1 crore from 100 people. You have to collect that 100 crore, like 1 crore from 10 lakh people. So that is the secret hidden here. People are ready to spend. Okay, if it is within their affordable zone, they're ready to spend. When it comes to Adidas, when Adidas, they stamped their footprint in Europe and all the other Western countries, or even Japan or other countries, there the prices are heftily high, and they could sell the products just with 1,000 members and can make the profit. But in India, you have to make effort and sell the products to 1 lakh people to get the same revenue. What's bothering you? What's going to be different? What's going to be different? Instead of having 1,000 customers buying for 1 lakh, okay, each, here we're going to have 1 lakh customers buying for 1,000 rupees each. That's going to change. Nothing else is going to change. For example, if you have only 1,000 customers in USA, and they're all going to spend nearly 1 lakh per product, okay, what's going to be total revenue? This is going to be total revenue. And here in India, 1 lakh people are going to buy, and they're going to price, the ticket price is only 1,000. They will be able to spend only 1,000. They cannot spend 1 lakh. So you have to design your product, customize your product in such a fashion that 1 lakh people will be able to spend 1,000 on your product. Then also your revenue is going to be this. So why worry when you can make the revenue in India, but your strategy has to be different? So you really have to ditch a strategy that you followed elsewhere when you come to India. So when you come to India, all you have to do is cut back on the premiumization and give them the value for money. So the value for money, the global value chain that you create in India, has to give them the greatest utility that they could ever get for 999. So now what's going to happen? What Adidas did? Have you ever learned about those news articles? Have you ever read? The news article says that Adidas has come up with 3 jerseys. You know what is a jersey, right? Suppose you must have known. Wait a second. I'll show you jersey cricket. Why? images. They're talking about film. Of course, that film, yeah. This is your jersey, right? So what happened was Adidas with the Indian jersey. ADIDAS. Yeah. And we can put India. Yeah. This one. Instead of talking, explaining, I can show you things, right? So Adidas has come up with this jerseys, okay? What they've done is that, I'll tell you, see these jerseys, okay? You can buy these jerseys at what price, I'll tell you. Adidas introduced these jerseys at 3 price ranges. One is that match jerseys. The price is 4,999. You and I are not going to buy this, okay? Don't worry. 2,999 is the replica jersey. It's almost first copy madri, okay? It's like replica jerseys. This is match jerseys, and this is our category. Do you know what is this called? This is called as fan jerseys. Okay, so this fan jerseys, no, this is going to be in demand by the Indian cricket fans. Nearly 75% of revenue for Adidas came from the sales of 999 jerseys. Why do you think so? Because in India, jerseys are a requisite, because we don't have a culture of buying jerseys for the cricket matches. When you go and watch it in stadium, we'll obviously buy a normal some 199 or 200 rupees jerseys in the pavement or outside the stadium we used to buy, right? So we have never bought one branded jersey at an affordable price. I'm not talking about 4,999. I'm not going to buy a jersey for 4,999, right? But I can buy a jersey for 999. That's the level of Indian income, like household income has increased. I can spend 999 for the entertainment, for my happiness, for the love of cricket, for the fandom, for whatever you call. The fan jerseys at 999 is affordable, it's quality, but one thing you have to see, the massification comes with the cost. Because when you have only 1,000 jerseys being sold at 5,000, the ball game is different. But when you're trying to sell 999 jerseys, you have to sell 5 jerseys in the place of 1 jersey. So in the place of treating just one consumer nicely, yeah, please welcome, we welcome you. What do you want? Which color do you like? Or may I know your phone number, email ID? Will note it. Whenever there is new offer comes up, we'll tell you. All these kind of consumer or customer care, there will be a loose when we come to sell the 999 fan jerseys. Why? Because in the place of maintaining one consumer, you're going to now maintain 5 consumers. So if you had 1,000 consumers who bought the 4,999 jerseys, okay, if you had 1,000 customers, in the place of maintaining 1,000 customers, you now have to maintain 5,000 consumers. So that's the problem here. It comes with a cost, and massification comes with a cost. You cannot be all sweetie, lovey-dovey with all the 5,000 consumers. But one thing you can be rest assured, that when you give the quality to the consumers, they're very happy about it. They buy your jerseys, and every time they want to buy jersey, they'll come to Adidas for 999 jersey, because this is your fandom jersey. Okay. And now I'm telling you, I will not buy 4,999 jersey. Am I telling you or not? I'm the same person who tells you I will buy a backpack or I will buy a travel bag for 5,999, even though 999 bags are also available. 999 bags are also available. 5,999 bags are also available. Now I'll show you an example. Okay, I hope you're not bored with all these stories. Why I'm giving you lots of stories from the news articles or from the business realm is for you to associate these stories with that of the topics that you study, that of the theories that you're going to learn, the assumptions that they're going to make in every law, whether it is law of demand, law of supply, or cost, production, or that too when it comes to the later parts, when we study about how the exchange rate are being fixed and all that. So this is the root of everything. So just bear with me. So I'll show you. Amazon. Did I? Okay. Here in Amazon.in, you know, right? Amazon.com is basically United States website. Amazon.in pertains to India. So shop online, Amazon poicha. Now here, I'm going to show you a brand that has inspired me. And later on, when I read the news article, I was like, oh yeah, it has made an imprint on me. It has made an impression. I thought it was a big, when I saw that travel brand, I thought it was a big brand. I thought it has been established for so many years and now they're coming up with a new range of travel bags. Wait, I'll show you here. What happened? Why is it loading? Now I'm going to show you Mokobara. I thought it was some Japanese company which has come to India to produce it. Oh, it's not like that. I'll show you. Why, man? Okay, I'll tell you the story in between. Okay, so basically, when it comes to jerseys, I wouldn't buy a jersey for 5,000 rupees because, in my opinion, for entertainment purposes, I don't want to spend 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. It's waste of money. But I can spend 999 because one t-shirt for 999 is worth. Because I can keep it for some years, at least for 5-6 years, or at least for 2-3 years. So 999 is a good bet on it because when I'm going to use it only for 5 or 6 times, right? Jerseys. Or even if you are a lover of avid lover of cricket and every weekend you're going to play cricket, you can wear as many times as possible. Okay, as many times as you want. But the basic thing is for textile, for one piece of dress, no, I cannot spend more than 999 is my mindset. But when it comes to travel, okay, what happens is that I can spend even 5,999. What do I want in that bag? Already the 999 bag is giving me quality, no problem. The VIP suitcases or American Tourister, you know, or the any other brands that we talk about, Sky bags, everything is giving me quality. But what is very different about this Mokobara? This Mokobara, no, they have that funky colors, that swag designs. And when I carry those bags, no, Mokobara brand bags, it gives me a sense of style, some swag statement, um, some really cool ideas of how you can, you know, use the travel bags, how the water pouch can be different, you know, water bottle keeping pouch, no, that pouch can be different, and how the laptop cases can be embedded into the travel bags instead of having the laptop bags, that kind of stereotypical bags. We're not talking about that. Mokobara bags are going to be like a swag statement. Okay, so this Mokobara bags starts at least from 1,999. Some basic bags start from 1,999. Will I be able to buy this? See, first of all, one thing you have to understand. I might have 12,000 rupees as pocket money, but I will decide whether to spend 999 on jersey or 4,999 on jersey. Okay, I have decided I will spend only 999 on jersey, which means even though I have 12,000 rupees in my pocket money, I should decide how much should I spend on a particular product. Okay, that is called as what? Effective purchasing power. Like what? You have purchasing power or not? Of course, I have purchasing power. I have 12,000 rupees. But am I willing to spend 5,000 rupees from that towards buying a jersey? No, I don't. Which means this money that I have is not going to turn into effective demand. No, when will this turn into an effective demand? Effective demand will happen only when I have money. Okay, I have money. Do I like jersey? I don't like cricket. Then there is no point of discussing about whether 4,999 jersey or 2,999 jersey or 999 jersey. There is no question of it because I'm not a fan of cricket and I hate jerseys. And that too, it is not going to be in cotton. And I'm in a very summer climate. I don't want jerseys at all. If the mindset of the person or if the mindset of the consumer is like this, customer is a person who doesn't like cricket. He doesn't watch cricket. She doesn't watch cricket. She doesn't like cricket. Appadina, what is the use of categorizing or segregating the jerseys into 3 types? 4,999 is called as the match jersey or the original jersey, and 2,999 is the replica, and the fan jerseys, which is the price has been watered down to 999 from 4999 in order to whatever story you spin off. The basic customer mindset is that he doesn't want to buy jersey, so he will not spend money on you. So having 12,000 with the Indian population or having 12,000 with you or with me is not going to make any change in the revenue of Adidas if you and I are not interested in cricket. Do you understand? So here comes the vital role of, do you really want to spend? Sometimes I might have only 1,000 rupees with me and I want to buy Mokobura bags because I'm in love with those bags. Now tell me, do I have money? No, I don't have money. Do I love the product? Yes, I would love to buy the product. I love it. Do you think this is an effective demand? No, because this is not going to increase the revenue of Mokobara, because this love for the bag is not going to turn into revenue for them, because I'm not going to buy. Why I'm not going to buy? Do you think because I don't want to spend 5,000? No, I don't have 5,000. So it's a question of whether you have 5,000 and you want to spend. Both are very critical questioning, because in this example of 12,000 with jerseys, I've told you, do you have 12,000? Yes. Yes, we have 12,000. Do you want to spend 4,000 from this towards buying jersey? No, which means you have money you don't want to spend on jersey. The second case is you have only 999 in your pocket and you love Mokobara, you want to buy the 5,999 bag. So now is this an effective demand? No, because Mokobara is not going to end up with increase in what? Revenue. All these things will find its perfect spot in your syllabus. They'll ask you, what is an effective demand? Effective demand is something of three constituents. Number one, you should have money. Number two, you should love the product. Number three, you should be willing to pay your money towards that product. I'll tell you an example. There is a product, okay, called as mobile phone. Okay, mobile phone. I have 10 lakhs with me. So do I have money? Yes. And Apple iPhone, okay, this Apple iPhone cost around 2 lakhs, whatever, 1 lakh, anywhere between 1 and 2 lakh. So now, do I love the Apple products? Of course, I do love it. Yes. So do I have money? Yes, I have money. Do I love the product? I do love the product. Number three, are you willing to spend your money towards buying this Apple iPhone? No. What is this? Don't you think this is paradoxical or contrary? It's very contradictory, right? Do you love the product? Yes, you love the product, but you don't want to buy it. Why? You love Mokobara bags, but you don't want to buy it. I love Mokobara bags, but I want to buy it. That is one thing. I don't like jerseys. I have money. I don't want to buy. That is a different thing. But here, look at it. I do have money. I love Apple products, but I don't want to buy it. Why? Because even though I love the product, had it been had the price range of Apple between 70,000 to 80,000, I would have bought. Okay, I would be willing to buy. But the price range is around 2 lakhs. I will not buy. I won't buy. So these are the nuances in the minds of consumers. So the consumers are telling you, what they're trying to tell you, they have 10 lakhs. Yes. They love the product, love for the product. Yes. Are they willing to buy the product? No. Then this is not an effective demand. So, like this, we have so many concepts embedded in economic syllabuses. So, you have to study that along with the business reality examples. Okay, the examples that is happening on a realm of business. In that realm, there are a lot of things that's happening every day. Okay, so I've told you about Ola shutting down its operations in New Zealand and Australia. Yeah. That example I've told you, in New Zealand, when they started the company, they wanted some loan and they went to the investor and the investor invested both in Ola and Uber. Those are all olden stories, old time stories. Now, Ola is not there in New Zealand. They have packed up all the bags and came back to India. They said, oh my God, let me concentrate only the Indian country and I will make all my business here only. I don't want to concentrate on New Zealand. I don't want to concentrate the Australia, because of some reason. Okay, I'll discuss that later on with you. But this Ola shutting down the international business operations is a big news for Ola employees, right? Because of this decision, lots of employees might have lost their employment in New Zealand and Australia. When TikTok was banned in India, nearly hundreds of employees who were employed because of TikTok, direct employment or indirect employment, okay, because of TikTok's closure in India, many people lost their jobs in India. In the same way, when Ola has decided to shut down its operations in US, I mean like in Australia and New Zealand, same thing might have happened there, which means every decision in every business conglomerate or in every multinational company or in every business decision, whether it is related to location or the change of CEO, or you are going to launch a new product, or you're going to cut back on the existing line of products, everything is going to make a dent in the business world. Okay, so Ola has shut down its operations, which means what? The demand and the supply. Ola is ready to supply. Ola is ready to make that ride hailing app. The services are available in New Zealand. Everything is okay, but the demand has to be optimal for Ola to make revenues, right? If people are like, I have money, I want to ride in cab, but I don't want to spend $500, but I don't want to spend $10, but I don't want to spend $125 for this. If people keep on giving up the, they don't want to use your services, would mean you end up with no revenues, no revenue, no profit. No profit, how will you pay back the money that you've received as investment, whether it is in terms of share or in debt? You will not be able to. So you have to just close, pakka closure, and then come back to India. Because in India, this ride hailing app is a huge success, because here many people don't have car. Okay, and people want to ride taxis as a very normal gesture. In a sense, if I have a car, my chances of traveling in ride is pretty much less. But in a country like India, where population is huge and number of cars are less comparatively with that of developed countries, the thriving of ride hailing apps like Ola, Uber, the chances are pretty strong here. And that might be the reason why Ola chose to concentrate only on Indian bazaar. Okay, so now anything else I've left over? No, everything I've decided. No, I've discussed, right? And when it comes to the macroeconomics, it's a fun game. I tell you, it's full on fun when we discuss macroeconomics. It's because it's like we're gossiping about someone we like or someone we don't like or someone we hate or someone we love. It's like that. So when it comes to macroeconomics, you can talk, you can understand, you can discuss, you can learn, you can outshine. There are lots of things that can happen over the discussion of macroeconomics. Unlike microeconomics is pretty much serious. It's a very serious business when you study. Okay, and macroeconomics is a serious business when you implement. When you are the finance minister and you're presenting the budget, then it becomes difficult. When you are the country's foreign secretary, and when you are the treasury secretary of USA and you're visiting China, and you are doing things, then it's a serious business. But we as students, okay, we as learners, when we sit and study how the US treasury secretary has visited China and how she has upskilled her how do you call the chopsticks, she has learned to use chopsticks and she loved using chopsticks when she visited China, and Chinese people appreciated the skill of using chopsticks when she visited that country, and how she loved the Chinese cuisine and she did not opt for bun and butter over there. Okay, and she went there, tried every Chinese cuisine there, and people applauding her for that, and how she convinced the trade secretary of China, and how the entire visit has turned out. When we read those things, it's definitely a very interesting thing. And what is the outcome of US and China trade war, how it's going to benefit Vietnam. Okay, and Vietnam is a South Asian country, and this country, see, connecting every country through a trade war or through an international news, and that country, for example, Vietnam, Now, Vietnam's capital, Ho Chi Minh City, and we've read about Ho Chi Minh, no, that person in history, in a history books. So that Ho Chi Minh City, and how Vietnam is a fully communist country, and for the last half century, which means for the last 50 years, there was no change in the rulers of Vietnam, almost the same party. In fact, they call Vietnam as being in the form of a dictatorship, communist dictatorship, and lots of news that is in relation to business, which is happening in Vietnam, okay, which is happening in Bangladesh, because they say Adidas, Nike, all of these companies, okay, they have their textile factories, okay, only in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh as a country, Bangladesh has seen its progression, increase in national income, or the way it has developed from a very, very, very poor country to a developing country. That kind of a tag has reached Bangladesh only because many of the subsisting farmers are being drawn into the production factory in Bangladesh, where a sharp increase in production of textiles for branded clothings in USA or in any other developed countries have come and opened up the textile factories in Bangladesh. Because of that, Bangladesh as a country has been taken out of poverty. They have increased in the standard of living. Okay, their country as a whole has come up from the state of poor country to a developing country. So when we touch the macroeconomics is like this. When we touch the US Treasury Secretary visiting China and the skill of chopsticks, how she talked to the Chinese representatives, and how Chinese representatives perceived her, or how the Chinese counterparts welcomed her, and how in the trade war between China and United States, many of the Southeast Asian countries are being trampled up. How India is going to use this. For example, Apple iPhones, iPhone industry, as in Apple iPhones are major. It was produced, it was assembled, it was designed, everything was happening only in designing happened in US, right? Designing happened in US. When it comes to, wait a second, when it comes to Apple iPhone, designing happened in US, okay, and assembling happens in China. Now, this was the news that we knew, right? Before 2020 COVID, none of the production factories or assembling factories were in India. Complete supply chain of Apple iPhones are either in United States or in Korea or in Taiwan, something like that. Okay, major production happened only in China. Assembling of Apple iPhones happened in China. So what has changed now after COVID? That Wuhan problems arising between US and China, what happened? Very easily, people shifted the blame on China, saying that China has produced so much, it has so much of surplus production, it is dumping its good on all the countries, and all the countries are suffering because of Chinese overproduction, all blah, 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 blah on Chinese counterparts. Now, what Apple does? Apple feels that, okay, we are depending too much on China. We have to, we just have to leverage the risk. We just have to move the supply chain, not depending completely on China. We have to move away from China to some other country. So now they brought a policy called as China +1 strategy. There's a strategy called China +1. And this strategy is being used by all the countries in the world except China. Okay. And what is the strategy? They feel that we should not 100% or 10% dependence on China is always a trouble, because China is now supporting Russia and not the Western countries. And Russia is having a war with Ukraine, and the entire world is crying for Ukraine. Okay, where Russia receives support from China. When China and Russia supports each other, we should be away from both China and Russia to some extent. So these are the questions that comes into place when we're talking about China +1. So US says that, okay, I'm not going to depend on China 100%. I'm going to, how do you call that? I'm going to just diversify the supply chain. They say, okay, I'm going to start a assembling factory in Tamil Nadu, or I'm going to start assembly factory in Bengaluru. They start the assembling factory in India. So it is only because of the not so cordial relationship between China and USA. China and USA not in good terms. As a result, India got a assembling factory. Now, this is a great thing for India. So, when we talk about macroeconomics, we touch India, we touch Vietnam, we touch Bangladesh, we touch USA, we touch China, we touch Wuhan, we touch overproduction there, we touch assembling factories in India. Now, what is so important? We're talking about the assembling factory in India, no? Actually, the price of one Apple iPhone is equal to $1,000 US dollars, okay? Which on an average, if you multiply by 100, 80, 90, 92, 93, whatever, we'll see one US dollar is equal to 100 rupees. We say the product's value is 1 lakh, no? This is 1 lakh rupees. This is the value of Apple iPhone. My dear students, please listen to me when I explain this, okay? Because this is not just a story. This has deeply ingrained economic concepts. So, value for Apple iPhone is 1 lakh. This is just for example. Don't tell me it's 1 lakh and 10,000, 1 lakh 10,200 plus GST and all. 1 lakh rupees. This is in terms of rupees. This is in terms of dollars. Talking in terms of dollars is comparatively easier because it is only $1,000, no? $1,000. So, the value of a product is $1,000. When the assembling was done in China, India felt like, why iPhones are not assembled in India? Don't you think Indians have that kind of talent? If you train Indians, we can easily assemble the mobile phones here. You can assemble the mobile phones here in factories, and then you can bring some, like, outsource it in India. That's what Indians have been time and again telling Apple company, telling Tesla, even the ministers of India, that is the central ministers of India, they have even directly on Twitter, okay, they've asked Tesla, why are you not coming to India? Why are you not coming to India? It's a very simple logic, man. Tesla, okay, yearly only 5,000 or 6,000 cars are being sold in India. Tesla cars are being sold in India. Whereas in China, lakhs and lakhs, okay, of Tesla cars are being sold in China. Now tell me, if 5 lakh cars are being sold in China, what cars? Tesla cars are being sold in China. And only 5,000 Tesla cars are sold in India. Which country do you think that Musk would give preference? Already he's a nutcrack only. To which country he'll give preference? If United States has to deliver 5 lakh cars to China, do you think it is a good, it is a rational decision to produce all the cars in US itself and then put all the cars on a ship and then send the ship to China? Do you think it's a viable option? No. Instead of that, Tesla is designing the car, okay, it designs the features of the car. All the mental ability work, all the designing works are happening only in USA. And then all the assembling works and all the production factory related works happen in China, because nearly 5 lakh cars are being produced in China. And when India is only buying 5,000 cars, it is very easy for Tesla company to just import 5,000 cars from China to India and not from US to India, because the distance is great, no? From US to India, import is not possible. So it's easier for Tesla to import the goods from China to India, and 5,000 cars is being sold in India, and that's all. Sorry. The appetite for electric cars, and that too on a premium car segment like Tesla, is very low in India when compared to that of China. When China is able to buy 5 lakh cars, Tesla will obviously go to produce the goods only in China, not in India. So despite this, when Indians or like central ministers or anybody for that matter, if you go and ask Tesla, please come to India, please come and produce, they're not going to make or move a call. They're not going to make a call on it, because that's not sustainable for them. Producing 5 lakh cars in India and then taking it to China, it's not a viable option. It's going to increase the transportation cost. When you want to sell Tesla, made in India, Teslas are made in India and then exported to China, China is not going to welcome that. So there are lots of ifs and buts in production chain. So coming back to this, it's a very simple example where you have this Apple iPhone, $1,000, and then Apple iPhones designed in United States. but it is assembled or produced in China. Why? Simple. The labor cost in US is heavy. Okay, so if you produce the same goods in China, the labor costs are very less. So you can produce it at a very lower cost in United States. I'm sorry, in China, not in US. Now that too, Apple iPhone, okay, this iPhone section, that phones, we'll call this as mobile phone hereafter. This mobile phone production is happening in two segregate areas. Number one, majority of mobile phones, that is Apple iPhones, that is having advanced, that Pro model, all Pro model uses significantly premium raw materials, significantly premium semiconductor chips, significantly premium temper board or motherboard or whatever you call. Everything that goes into Pro model are premium. Everything that goes into normal model is ordinary. So even when iPhone industry, that is iPhone company, wanted to shift its assembling to Tamil Nadu or South India, they only shifted the assembly of iPhones of normal model. None of the Pro models are now being assembled in India because we don't have any prior experience, or the human resource here that we have in South India, they are not well versed as that of Chinese, because Chinese are assembling and producing the goods for so many years, so many number of years. All of a sudden, South Indians cannot grab that. As a result, iPhone now has shifted its assembling units to South India only for normal models and not for Pro models. Of course, the Pro models might come into India's assembling units later on, but then you have to understand that even when iPhones want to shift their supply chain from China to India, they cannot do it on an overnight basis. Overnight, everything has to be shifted from China to India. It's not going to happen. Now, when for the very first time, when this iPhone company went into China, to produce this iPhones, that assembling units, this story is very close to my heart, because I felt it throws a lot of light on to how we understand economics. So this assembly unit in China, so now what happened is, iPhone, all the raw materials, designing, everything, okay, all the raw materials are now being exported from USA to China. Now it comes into China, and in China, assembling alone is done. Assembling alone is done. If you have 110 components to make iPhone, all 110 components, okay, it just comes to China, comes into China. All 110 components. Some 50 components might come from US. Some 50 components might come from Taiwan, because Taiwan is the leading top-notch manufacturer of chip, semiconductor chip they call. For example, in one car, that is electric car that we have, there are 1,000 microchips. So when it comes to advanced components, it might come from Taiwan to China. It might come from Malaysia to China. It might come from US to China. At the end of the day, what China was asked to do, when for the very first time iPhone wanted to assemble the iPhone in China, all 110 components came out of many countries into China, and now China is assembling all the 110 components in perfect, in a perfect, what do you call, manual type mari. They read the manual, user manual, how to fix it, and training is being given to Chinese, and people have started assembling it. And now everybody is talking like, oh my God, China is now assembling iPhones. China has now become a major manufacturing hub and all that. Is it worth all the hype? First of all, we should understand, yes, it is worth all the hype, because for a country like China, which is a developing country, now it is getting the opportunity to assemble. For example, in 2023 or only after 2020, we've got this opportunity. But way before, a decade before, in the last decade itself, China was leading, right? The last decade itself, China was leading in the assembling units. So now you have to see what is very important. Only in 2020, after that is only in post-pandemic, we have got this assembling units. But they got it pre-pandemic itself. They have that 5 to 10 years of experience. Of course, it is something that can be boasted about, but $1,000 assembly alone. That is assembling of iPhone. Okay, $1,000 is the value, right? Total value of iPhones. In this, microchips or semiconductor chips that is being used in iPhone will cost around $50. Okay, the tempered glass or the glass structure might cost around $150. And then the software inserted inside that might be around $200. Okay, something like this, all these cost components put together gives you this $1,000, right? $1,000, the value of Apple iPhone would mean 1,000 is made up of so many cost components. Do you understand? In all those cost components, only $5 is spent on assembling of iPhone. நல்லா புரிஞ்சுக்கோங்க. Properly listen. $1,000 is the value of iPhone. In this value, how much is being contributed by assembling the iPhone? Assembling one iPhone will give only $5 for the assembler, which means assembling the iPhone is only contributing $5 into the total value of iPhones. Now China is taking a leap. What it says is that if iPhone is costing $1,000 and I am assembling only for $5, no, only for $5 I'm assembling it, this will not fetch China a long-term profit or long-term sustainability in the electronics market. So what China did was, China did a backward linkage, meaning thereby if you have 110 components to make the iPhone, they are trying their best to come up with at least 10 to 12 components, and these 10 to 12 components will be produced in China. This will be produced in China such that the next time iPhone is trying to assemble the goods in China, out of the 110 components that they have to bring into China to assemble, at least 10 components are produced at the perfect quality by Chinese companies itself. If Chinese companies are ready to produce 10 components out of 110 components, then what will happen? Then 10 components will be, components will be bought from the Chinese companies for at least $60. Do you understand? And assembling will give them $5 revenue. Do you understand? Now the total value contributed by Chinese in the assembling of iPhone is $5 or maximum $10, $5 to $10, that's all. But the 10 components that China wantedly they invested in R&D, they trial tested it, they ran the programs, they came up with 10 components with perfect top-notch quality, and now Apple company has no other choice but to choose this top-notch quality goods available in China itself instead of importing it from Taiwan, because it is going to add extra cost. So now these 10 components which are properly manicured by the Chinese companies cost around $240. Do you understand? Now the total value of Apple iPhone still remains $1,000, but the contribution by Chinese assembling alone was $5 to $10 before. But now the total Chinese contribution has come up to how many dollars? $250, which means this is called as global value chain. In the chain of Apple iPhone, there are 110 components. 1, 2, 3 input. You have 110 components. Out of these 110 components, only one part was contributed by China, which gave them only $5 revenue. But now out of this 110 components, they chose nearly 10 to 12. I'm just telling you for a hypothetical example, but in reality, from $5 of assembling, they have moved their value chain today around $250 value is created and contributed by Chinese company towards Apple iPhone. So now the total Apple iPhone global supply chain, In this global supply chain, you have Taiwan, okay? You might have China, you have America, okay? You have India. So what is the contribution of China towards this? What is the total contribution of China towards iPhone? It is now $250. Today, even after grabbing the assembling units to India, India will be able to contribute only $5 to $10 because we are yet to come up with the contributing of global value chain to come up with $250. Okay, China has already achieved that feat. So this $250 is the global value supply chain contributed by China towards Apple iPhone. And this $5 is our global supply chain or global value that you add. So the value added by India is $5. The value added by China is $250. So even after just getting the assembling units away from China, China is losing only $5 revenue. India is gaining $5 revenue, China is losing $5 revenue. But what about the goods that are being properly researched, developed, designed, designated and produced and marketed and being sent into the supply or sent into the production lines of Apple iPhone? What will happen to them? This $250 market cannot be that easily changed towards Indian hands because it takes a lot of effort, lot of infrastructure, lot of infrastructure policies from government and a lot more, which means we should learn about microeconomics and macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is my favorite because you tend to learn so much about big things, international politics, and because of those political tensions between two countries, trade gets affected. Because India and China had the 2020 Ladakh standoff, today we have no TikTok. And today TikTok is a very big revenue maker in USA. USA has TikTok, India doesn't have. And then US and China are directly in trade war. And we're talking about semiconductor chips. No. What is a semiconductor chip? Today you have this camera, you have this mobile phones or smartphones, smart cars, everything that actually works only with this microconductor, like the semiconductor chips. Like one car will have 1,000 chips, okay? But the chips that you use in the smart car or the smart phones will cost around some $10. But those used in advanced, artificial intelligence robot, it will cost around $10,000, which means this chip manufacturing is of a great importance. And one thing I want to tell you, this this is the semiconducting chips, no? It was firstly designed only in USA and it was also produced in USA. But what happened was, United States felt that the production cost is too much in America, so they shifted the production to Taiwan. This happened in 90s, okay? So USA designed all the chips and all the production happened in Taiwan. And what happened was Taiwanese government started something called as Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, and lots of subsidies and discounts and propulsion of production, everything happened in Taiwan. As a result, Taiwanese become more advanced, more equipped in terms of personal development, in terms of the human resource, or the people in Taiwan are more conducive or more talented in producing these microchips than the Americans. Americans lack that knowledge, lack the training, lack the skill. Because of that, today Taiwan is the leader in the semiconductor chip production. Okay, starting from 1 meter chip, half meter chip, 2 nanometer chip, like that. Now today semiconductor industry is on an explosive growth in everything that you use, starting from smartphone, cars, AI, robots, or in anything that you can imagine in the modern world. Everything runs only on chips. In fact, in 2020, during COVID time, once the COVID, that strong restrictions are being released, even after that, there was a very huge delay in the supply of cars. Why? Because every car requires at least like 600 to 1000 microchips to be embedded into the car. If you don't have those chips, then definitely the car is not going to run, which means these chips have to prominently, these are being produced only in Taiwan. It has to go from Taiwan to US in order to release the car or supply of car. So it was a great deal of ordeal or pain or a setback, such that during COVID, US and the entire European countries felt the heat and importance of semiconductor chips. And today, the top-notch designing quality is with United States, and the top-notch production capacity is with Taiwan. Do you understand? That is the importance of semiconductor chips and the modern world. Even today, United States has literally begged the Taiwanese government and the Taiwan companies to come and invest in USA and train Americans to produce the chips, because the semiconductor chip production technology is very new to, in the sense, the manufacturing is new to Americans. They do not possess the skill set for production of these semiconductor chips. Whereas when it comes to Taiwan, they have the dexterity, they have the fingertips, they'll say he has everything in his fingertips, like that. The dexterity of producing semiconductor chip lies with Taiwanese. Now US literally goes and begs the Taiwanese companies to come and start their factories in USA and train the United States of American population to produce the microchips there. Because why are they doing it? Because Taiwan says it is a separate country, and China says, no, Taiwan is not a separate country. You are my country only. You are within my country only. You are mine only. That is what China is time and again reiterating to the entire world. So now US is very, very, very confused, or US is threatened by the claims of China. China says that belongs to me. Taiwan belongs to me. TSMC belongs to China. That's what China claims. Taiwan doesn't say that. Taiwan says I'm an independent country, but China doesn't think so. And China has a very, very, very staggering military power. So you can't easily, go heads on with China. So all you can do is just relax and bring the factories from from Taiwan to USA in order to feel safe. And that's what USA is doing now. So when you study about microchip processor, or when you study about the Microsoft, you study about Google, you study about Meta, you study about Mistral, you study about any artificial intelligence company, you really have to know the global supply chain. The power shortage, the powerhouse of semiconductor chips is Taiwan. And Taiwan, as China claims, Taiwan is their own. And now China is investing huge amounts and staggering amounts of money into this semiconductor chip, such that they want to come up in this sector within next 10 years. So they have started to invest hugely in semiconductor chips. But one thing that China lack is the designing capability and technology. And that is why USA has literally stopped exporting top-notch quality or top-notch semiconductor chips or top-notch technology to China. What if, because USA feels that what if I send the top-notch quality technology to China, and China uses that to research the technology, and with that exported technology, China will come to its senses, and they might crack the code. They might also become proliferant in coding and in coming up with the nanotechnology or microchip designing or whatever. What if China picks up the momentum? And the only competitive advantage that United States now has is that I know the designing, nobody else knows. I only know the designing. Not even European countries know. Even Germany, France, Italy, any of the European countries, they do not have the designing capability. Only United States company has it designing capability. Now United States feels threatened because Taiwanese has the manufacturing capability, and Taiwan as a country is independent, but still China claims it to be their own territory. And now this manufacturing comes as a threatening factor to USA. Imagine the only competitive advantage that US has is designing capability. What if China competes, copies, learns, research, and comes up with a better technology? What will I do? I will lose everything to China. So I don't want to export the top-notch technology to China. This is what is being discussed in USA. So USA, they don't want to have advanced technology transfer to China. Do you understand? Now, what China says that, okay, in China, none of the government schools, government banks, government offices will use any of the United States computers, whether it is, whether it is starting from simple monitors or keyboards or CPUs or anything for that matter, or software. None of the software that runs in the government will be that of United States. We are going to completely revamp the entire setup of government offices, schools, not just government schools and offices. Chinese government can put a ban on entire private property also to not use the United States products. But what is the problem there? Since majority of the products are being manufactured in China itself. For example, iPhone is being manufactured in China. What if China says that nobody should buy Apple iPhones? What will happen then? Apple iPhone will close the shop in China and they'll come to other countries. As a result, China will lose the momentum of manufacturing and employment, right? So China will have a push and pull effect. China will see, okay, I'm going to not use any of my products in my government offices, but still private can use. So it's like kind of push and pull mechanism that China does with USA, and USA does with India, India does with Russia, Russia does with Ukraine, Ukraine does with Israel, Israel does with other countries. So this is a whole chain effect, okay? So I hope by the end of this class, we are at the end of this class, you have some idea about what goes on around us, okay? What's happening with Reliance, what's happening with Apple, what's happening with that, Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company. Many of Indians work there, by the way. Many of Indians work in Taiwan in the TSMC company. And India is planning to bring all those Indians who are, working in TSMC back to India. And they're trying to launch some baby steps in semiconductor industry here. As we've seen, when Tesla was boasting about the electric cars and how it's selling 5 lakh units of electric cars in China, and in America, India was very chill and cool because India cannot buy Tesla cars like 5 lakh car per year, because here the income fragmentation or the income level in India is different. So we actually adapted the electric version into bikes here. So we have so much varieties in electric bikes here than electric car. So when electric cars was a very big flagship product in every other developed country, India chose its own path. It carved its own path in electric bikes, because since everyone is eating product A, I can also not eat product A because I don't have the appetite. If I have the appetite, I can eat. If I don't have the appetite, I just don't want to copy it. Of course, I want to ride on the electric waves, but that electric waves doesn't have to be car. It can be electric bikes. That's how we as a country pick up the momentum of the entire global supply value chain and all that. And we will discuss much more topics like this in the sessions that is yet to come. But this is the basement that we are making here. This is the basement that we are trying to make here. In such a fashion, this is going to give you so much of insight into the economic theories, okay, examples given, and the sums that you're going to solve, and everything that we're going to discuss from here on. Why demand has gone down, why supply is up, and what is the problem, why the countries are, why the countries are putting tariff on each other. For example, we have lots of made in China products, to one point where we people have started to ignore, no, I don't want to buy China products. That was the heat of made in China products. So toys were predominantly produced in China and imported to India. And Indian central government, they wanted to make a change. They said, please make toys in India. We'll give you some subsidy, we'll give you some grant, we'll give you some policy support. Okay. And they did. And nearly 52% of import of toys was stopped. And the export of toys, because we started to make in India, right? A lot of toys are being made in India because of that, because of the policy push, because of the subsidies given, because of the grants given to the Indian manufacturers, because of the think tank, because of the ideas, because of the educational toy sector that was booming in India. Okay, because of that, India was somewhat closer to self-sufficiency in terms of toys, and even Indian toy sector literally exported to like 239% increase in the total export of toys from India. Whereas the import of toys reduced from 100% like import to 52%. There was a 52% decrease in the import of toys. So whenever there is a policy push, bigger things tend to happen. In the same way how Taiwan is now a major hub of semiconductor chips. Why? Because Taiwan government gave a push. In the same way, toy sector in India is now brimming with so much of revenue because of that policy push given by central government, Indian government. So it is always the government role, the role of government in pushing a particular sector is always there. It's not like, okay, only Ambani can do, Adani can do. No, without the support of Indian government, none can do. Nobody can flourish. Only with the support of government we can do. And that is what we'll be seeing later in the later chapters. When we see what is monetary policy, when we see what is fiscal policy, when we see what government is doing in order to increase the revenue and to decrease the expenditure, and what is tariff, what do you mean by tariff barrier and non-tariff barrier. There are lots of things to discuss in the upcoming classes. But for all those classes, upcoming classes, what is the basic fundamental that you have to understand is these stories, this is like that environmental setup. Without knowing what environment you're getting into, you will never be able to study. For example, the first day you're going to school, if they teach the most important topic, you'll not be able to understand. First, you have to set the table. When you're about to eat, you have to set the table. You have to set the table. You have to keep the forks or spoons or plates, or you have to clean it. You have to make it presentable, and only then you'll be entering into main course, right? In the same way, I have set the table now. And from the next class onwards, we'll follow the exact study material issued by C Institute, because that's like the Bible for us. That's like Gita for us. That's like Quran for us. That's everything for us. So we are going line by line, word by word, letter by letter, in theme, in spirit and in words. Only we go by C Institute study material. I hope you have understood this class. And in the next class, we'll start with, I'll start giving you the material, okay, completely from C Institute study material. So first you have to listen to the class. From next time onwards, there is a protocol. You will first listen to my class. I'll tell you the important points, and then I will give you some notes which is prepared by me, not by me, from the Institute study material. I'll give you a summary, and that summary you can first go through that summary. So once you set the table, we've set the table, we have attended the class, I've given you the summary, you can read the summary sheet, and after reading the summary sheet, please go take a book and give the study material one glance. You don't have to understand everything line by line, word by word, but then you have to go at least read once, and then you can turn up to the end pages and you can see the multiple choice questions and you can answer that. And one more thing I want to tell you, multiple choice questions given at the back of the books and some other model question papers and all that will be solved in the class. And I will tell you, I will not be explaining you one question and four options will be given. One is the right answer, three are the wrong answers. The most important part of our classes is that when we'll discuss why these three answers are not the right fit. We will not just stop with this is the correct answer. Do you know why? No, we will not stop with that. We'll say this is the correct answer, but do you know why these three answers are not the right fit? So that's how we are going to approach to each and every chapter, to each and every unit in economics. I hope and wish you all the best for your studies, for your upcoming exams, for your upcoming preparations and all that. Until then, it's bye from me, Krishna Priya. In the next class, we'll study, we will be, in the next class, we'll be covering both Unit 1 and Unit 2 because that's not a big deal. It's very comparatively, relatively, a very small chapter only. From that, maximum 3 questions might be asked, that's all. 3 to 4 questions might be asked. So, we will complete the entire first chapter in the next class. Okay? Thank you. Take care. Bye.